In last session we understood what is the action tags. Let us understand what is JSP implicit objects we are having. Okay, so if you can see this first one, like implicit objects, we are having several implicit objects. What is the implicit objects? Let us understand this first. So implicit objects in JSP are the objects that are created by the container automatically, and the container makes them available to the developer. The developer do not need to create them explicitly. See, in Sublet we are having number of APIs like Sublet context, Sublet config, right? And we are having Sublet request, Sublet response, print writer. We are using all these things, all these API for HTTP session request dispatcher, right? Now, if you want to use or that kind of concept you want to access through the JSP, what you can do? You can create object, but container is giving you this object. You just use this object. Okay. So automatically we are having some of the object like auth. Okay. Uh, we are having session, config, application, page, request response. All these are the inbuilt or predefined objects. That's what we call implicit objects. Since these objects are created automatically by the container and are accessed using standard variables, since they are called implicit objects, right? And the implicit objects in JSP pages are passed by the container inserted into the generated sublet code, right? So once we use what happened here, like once it is getting translated, okay, to the sublet, and then sublet code take care of that object, okay. They are available only within the JSP service method and not in any declaration, right? So it is inside that you can use it. Our own methods can't access them as they are local to the service method and are created the conversion time of JSP into the sublet, right? But we can pass them to our own method if we wish to use them locally, right? So we can pass to that method and then we can use it. Clear? Good. So in these previous images we have seen that we cover the directives, we cover the scripting, we cover the action tag. Now it's time to understand what is implicit objects, right? So request, response, application, config, all these are here, right? So we'll understand each and every one by one. What is the usage of this? Okay. Now request and response first. In the sublet we are having two API, HTTP sublet request and HTTP sublet response, right? So we were using request.get parameter and then we are saying response.set content and then we are doing response dot redirect or response dot uh, something like that, right? Now here you need not to create object. You can directly say request.get parameter here. In the skiplet you can write the Java code, right? Get query string. So typical use for the request in JSP is to get the details of HTTP query strings such as query name and parameters. So get query string. So the method is there. You'll get the whole stuff whatever they have requested, right? Okay. The output will include like this as a part of the display page. The response can be used for the same purpose as the HTTP sub response in a sublet, such as adding cookies. So response.add cookies, remember if we have done with the sublet, right? Okay. So next is the auth. We were creating object in the sublet. We're writing print writer auth and then we were saying response.getWriter, right? So we're creating object. Here you need not to do that. You just write or.println. It will work. Or.print, or.println, anything you want that. Okay. So this auth object is from which API? Is it from the print writer? No. As we know, there is a print writer. From print writer, there's another API we are having, that is a JSP writer. Okay. Now from this JSP writer, auth object has been created. So in JSP they have extended this print writer and they are allowing you to work with the uh, auth object. Okay. And providing some extra facilities to you. Next is the session dot set attribute. So there in Sublet we're creating HTTP session object. I mean HTTP session, let us say session, and then request dot get session, right? Here we needed to do that. Every page is having by default session. Okay. So that session you can retrieve. If you don't want, you can just write page and then you can write session equal to false, right? So here you can directly work with the session dot set attribute. You can set some values, some name and value you can set here. Later next page can look for this name and they can get this value, right? This is what session we have here in JSP. So session is the implicit object here. Now next is the config. So sublet config here, I mean in the JSP page you want to retrieve some configuration from the file, web.xml file. You can just say here config.getSublet context. So retrieving the sublet context, and then we are saying get sublet information. We'll get the information of that sublet. And so config is the object of sublet config. Any configuration information you want to retrieve from the JSP page, you can get it from that, right? If you are willing to write some mapping for JSP pages, that you can do also. So instead of writing sublet class, you can write JSP file. In the web.xml we were doing mapping, right? Sublet name, sublet class, and then again sublet name and URL pattern. So what we'll do, how we can do the mapping for the JSP file? We can just write a JSP file instead of sublet class. Okay. And then we can retrieve all this configuration information if this JSP file is containing to the page. Okay. Next is the application. The application is implicit object. In sublet we are having sublet context, right? Here if you want to work with the sublet context, we can directly take application and we can work with that. So application dot set attribute and then application dot get attribute methods we can call, and we can work like a sublet context. So here we are having implicit object for that, right? So it refers to the overall web application environment that the JSP belong to. In the beginning you can set something, application dot set attribute. Later on every pages you can keep getting that value. Okay. Next is the page. Page is another implicit object. Okay. Is of type objects. So there's a one object class in Java, as we know. So we are having the object from that class. Okay. And the object name is what? Page. And it is assigned a reference to the sublet that is executing the JSP service method. Okay. Thus in the sublet generated by Tomcat, the page object is created like this, object page equal to this. So because page is of type object, it is of less direct use than simply accessing the implicit this object, right? To access any of the methods of the sublet through page, it must be page cast to the types object. Thus the two following lines of code are equivalent. Like look at here, what we are doing at this dot log. So whatever the message we are passing here, it will log to the log file. Instead of this, we can also write here that http sublet page dot log, right? Another message. So we are just typing, converting to the sublet type. As you probably will not be using the page object in your own code, the main thing to remember for the exam is that it is not the same as the page context object, and that is of type object, right? So page is not from the page context, page is from the object class. Page context is another implicit object we are having, which is from the page context itself, right? So these are the implicit objects we are having. Okay, so that's all about the implicit objects for JSP page.